let's start with Director Douglas, if there's any specific questions or desires right now.
I do not have any specific questions or desires right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Director Simons.
Yes, so I had mentioned at our last meeting really doing some work on our district and building culture. And Corey, we've talked about this in our one-on-ones, and I really feel very strongly that we have a small window um, after this COVID pause, that when we return back, that we should be taking advantage of that pause, that opportunity to come back and say, who do we want to be as a district when we come back? And I think perhaps part of the strategic work were some of that principles and what are we going to establish as our values as a district. And when I'm in the buildings, I really love how each building has its values on the walls everywhere. Um, would we consider having a core set of values that's consistent? Maybe I mean there is some consistency. Maybe it's just that I don't have that knowledge as to how that came to be, but um, we should be displaying the culture of who we want to be at every single level, from the board level to the administration level to the site level and to our student level. We should all be held to the same standards of what we value, while creating that space for the uniqueness of each school too. So that's something I'm really passionate about wanting to see um, in our work. And I think I've talked everybody's ear off about the book Culturize and what I find fascinating about that, and looking at student achievement differently, and looking to ensure success for every student. And that begins with the culture of how we set expectations for how we go about ensuring every student succeeds. So that's the big one for me. I probably have a list of others and I can communicate those. But that's the big one for me.
Thank you, Director Simons. Director Mosqueda Jones.
Thank you. So I asked Corey a few questions beforehand. So the only thing that I want to kind of bring up now, because I'm really looking forward to really digging into this work, is actually echoes what Director Simon said. And when I look through a lot of the pieces in here, it seems to me they all fit there's a lot that fit under the umbrella of um, school climate. And under that would you could use culture or climate or however you want to use it, and the building relationships piece and how that all works. And I'm wondering if we can't kind of move up a little bit and take that look at what are the values, but then bring in all the voices that maybe we didn't get a chance to quite get, or that I know we didn't get a chance to quite get, especially given um, the very real hurt that a lot of our families have right now, to bring in Black voices and student voices and Indigenous voices and people of color voices, and look at what does that really mean? What does the culture or the systemic climate mean if we are going to be truly anti-racist so that we can all do better? That's my quick and dirty version, so we're not here till 11 o'clock.
Thank you, Director Mosqueda Jones. Director Dawson Walton.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, I appreciate it being laid out the way it is. I think it starts to lay out our clear process that we can, in decision making, how we make decisions, where decisions are made, where they're not made, where board members have influence, where they don't. I am coming from a perspective of we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails from our community concerned around our board and how we're responding to recent two recent pandemics, really, COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd, and the impact of our on our community. And unfortunately, even recently as today, I was alerted of another post um, from our board, one of our board members, just about the criminalization of George Floyd. And so I'm really concerned about that. And so, in the letter, there was laid out 12 uh, action items. And so, like the first one, uh, a resolution at our board meeting expressing the Osseo School District's support of justice for George Floyd and condemning racism in any form in this school district community, and examining our own practices, procedures, and policies where we identify and perpetuate structural racism and white supremacy that predominates the educational system. So I can write that resolution and I will bring it forward. I think I would like to have that at a meeting where we're all together, and we can also hear from our community at that meeting and public forum. So that's something that I'm committed to. Um, Honoring George Floyd's life at our next board meeting, I would like that on the agenda. 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence, and I'd like that, throughout our district, so our district knows and they can know that we're honoring his life and justice for George. Again, will be happy to work on a board statement committed to support Black, Indigenous families, students, and employees of color, and I will work on writing that. And whoever feels the need to sign on to that and supports that, we can do that. But I will be issuing that as well. We've talked about, I think that increasing the voices of Black, Indigenous people of color to dismantle racism in our school system. The example is decision-making document. And Corey, I think you laid out some concrete ways to incorporate feedback from families that, you know, I think the more opportunities we have for families and people in our and students and teachers to provide input, the better. And I just would like to just track that feedback. What are we doing with it? I think that's the next step. I think it's really important to, and I've heard this a lot in the community, of establishing a parent of color partner committee, with really the power to start to bring solutions forth to the district. I think that everything we heard earlier today, while yes, I think the staff and the leaders in this district they put their hearts and souls into the work, but I also think we're not quite hitting the mark. And I believe with all my heart that if student and parent voice are so critical to providing solutions um, to our most urgent and pressing issues, inclusive of our budget priorities as well as our legislative priorities. Implementing a student cabinet, which Corey alluded to, and I would like to just reiterate that I absolutely think that you have that feedback, but I also would like, I've seen a lot of districts have students as part of their board, and there's many different ways to look at that. So I really would like to look more into that as a board, and maybe at a future work session. Adequate support for our new assistant superintendent of equity. I mean, that area it's huge, and so ensuring that that is a huge priority for our district, and ensuring the success of that. Of course, the listening and engaging sessions with our community to discuss the racial issues and experiences in our district, and really to bring our district together. And I just believe that if we don't name it, we aren't going to be able to move on. So that's why I think it's like, I know you hear me talk about it a lot. This is because, like, the more we kind of get away from it, the more it's gonna continue. I was reading this thing that said, well, anyways, it doesn't matter. Okay, so commit to a cultural audit every year, including the school board. Creating a space to engage students, parents, staff, and community regarding our student resource officers. So while I know the cities have been taking their votes, there was public comment last night. Maple Grove, I'm not sure, in Brooklyn Park has theirs. This issue of school resource officers is not going away. It's becoming a national focus, and I think Corey, and what you were saying, like we hear from our the cities, and then our students, and really creating that space, and that evolves as whatever that looks like. um and identifying ways to contract equitably in areas of construction, purchasing. And I thank you for addressing that. I think that there are many ways to do that. Examples of, I think, just looking at this, some of the state's requirements. So those are, I can't, to me, these are immediate action items that must be taken. If we're going to move forward with any strategic priorities, it sets the tone of where we're going, and then we can really get to, the moving forward with where we are with our district. So
May
Okay.
I,
So from a
sorry,
Thank you,
may I-
Director. No, wait, thank you, Director Dusselmoten. I appreciate that. Director Mosqueda Jones.
I just want to clarify. I think it might be more impactful if we have the 8 minutes and 46 seconds at the July meeting, because we might be in person. Director Dawson Walton, does that make sense to you?
yeah, that's what I said in the beginning,
Yeah,
that
that's good.
everything
Okay.
would move
Yeah,
forward.
I thought I heard at the next one. So I misheard you. I apologize for that. The other thing that I wanted to highlight on that is I've been doing some research on having students on the board, and there are places that have real success of having voting members, students that are voting members on the board. I'd like to look into what the legal ramifications of that, I mean, what we have to do to be able to do that. And then there was another thing that I think is probably a high priority for me, is when we talk about having parent and student voice at all levels. I think when we talk about the culture of climate and discipline particularly, I think that's where we need to have insight from students and families about discipline and where it leads us. The problem that we have in our society is, I heard someone say to me, is that fear and scarcity has taken a hold of our school system, because we don't have a lot of resources, and we end up policing our own students. And instead of policing our own students or having a token system or a reward system, how can we honor everyone's particular race and culture and work together to find the best discipline practices that are truly about creating a community and culture? Thanks again.
Thank you, Director Mosqueda Jones. And when I
So-
look,
sorry, go ahead.
I look at this in three things, and I think Director Dawson Walton and many of you just talked about the things we want to do from an equity piece, and very high priority items as we discussed. And there's two others that I look in here, and that I'll be looking at these things as we go into the future. The one is academics, which can be hand in hand with equity, but it's also academics. What are we offering our children? What type of courses? How do we prepare them? And then that's trades and CTE and online and immersion and those type of things. And then and really those are the programmatic items. What type of programs are we offering to our families and our students to draw them to the district and to keep them in a district and to be very vocal supporters of the district going forward? So those are the three things I want to take a look at. And we need to be looking at some things first, others going into the future. Some are much bigger items that need a lot of planning. So that's how I'm going to look at things. And I think we have a very good start along all of those axes at this point. So with that, I think Director Simons, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, from a process standpoint, so typically the board does not vote on specific initiatives like this. Typically, we provide direction to the superintendent, and typically we have some consensus. So from a process standpoint, so Corey, we have our lists of things that we think need to be added. Um, if we could have a Google Doc kind of capturing that, so we see the full list of what all board members are putting in there. One challenge is I'm not sure if we're going to plan to kind of discuss everybody's items and identify whether there's support for them or not. But do uh, how are we going to decide what we move forward with? So either we'll have to bring it to some type of vote, which is not what we normally do because these are management items. We don't vote on the district doing this initiative or that initiative. How are we thinking of working through this? Are we going to do some of this tonight or in the future? And then um, for the list that was presented by our 2 board members, it's not clear to me which ones are being asked for discussion at a work session versus some type of action or vote at the next board meeting. The resolution information is clear, but we also can't break laws in communicating with each other in the interim. So it's kind of difficult to work this unless we're working it right now or at our next work session.
Okay, so I thought I laid that out, but maybe I wasn't clear enough. Because I think some of the stuff Corey addressed, so I was just going
Yeah.
through bullet by bullet. So I think I thought I was clear, but if there was something that I need to bring clarity on, please let me know, because it sounds like contracting, Corey and Ron are taking care of. It sounds like the student cabinet, Corey, it's in his hands. I think the parent engagement piece would, I'm assuming, be with Lehan and Brian. I don't know. That's kind of where I was going. But if there's something I should be clear on, just let me know because I can.
I would
And
Yeah.
maybe,
So
go ahead, Tanya, sorry.
yeah. So something like creating the cultural audit every year that would go into the work, and we would talk about what that means and when we. So it's not that we're voting or trying to say yes or no to this now.
So, for example, that particular one, I think we can accomplish through our work with our ECAP
Yes.
process, because
Right.
that'll identify some annual things we're going to do every year. Once we to study that, that would be my recommendation. I'm open to other suggestions. And I think Director Dawson Walton's right. There's a few things that are really for you as a board to decide. For example, the resolution, the moment of silence, the board statement. Those are board member meeting items. The other ones that I went through are more of the administration. In my lens, the ones that fall on my shoulders or our cabinet's shoulders to develop and figure out how to do. And I think Mike is right. What can we do right away? What takes a little more planning to get in place. So that's there's the kind of management and governance way of looking at it. I think Kelsey, you were right on the right path there. So
Okay.
that would be my offering up is how to sort them out.
Thank you, Corey. Director Douglas, you have a question?
Yeah, well, so I just wanted to ask about specifically the idea of a student school board or student cabinet. And so I guess I'll just share that when I first became a board member, and I had a meeting with Kate McGuire about moving this type of initiative forward really early on in my service. And I don't know if it was because of maybe a lack of support from other board members or if it was, administratively, it wasn't really feasible, but it didn't really gain a lot of traction. And it didn't seem like there was a clear way to do that. And I think that that's a really huge positive and immediate change that we can make. But I guess what I'd like to know is from Director Dawson Walton is, are we looking at more of a student school board where we have students that sit up at the board with us, or cabinet, a student-led cabinet? Where exactly are we going? Because I think those are two different things, and I think we need to specifically identify which way we're going to go with that. And then I'd like to see this, whatever it is, initiated prior to the start of the next school year, so that we can really get these kids involved in the work that we're doing.
So my recommendation would be that's an administrative task, and that's on my shoulders to figure out. And I would hope to have it in place by the start of the school year. With the summer being a little more challenging and one less meeting, I want to make sure we can only go as fast as we can go. And I have worked in other districts that have had, for example, North St. Paul has a student rep from each high school. They're a rep. They're not a voting rep, but they're a rep, and they're there. They come for part of the meeting and give reports to the board and listen to the board. inform and give feedback, but are not voting because they're not elected officials. And then, I wouldn't be able to even really launch a student-led advisory committee till students are back in school.
Right.
And we're not sure what that'll look like yet, too, by the way. So it might be virtual, who knows? But I think if you can give us some space to come back with the final draft in August with a little more detail there. In between now and then, though, please offer ideas. Jackie, you had one, and there's some other models that are out there, and you need a little time to study it too, right? So I can bring a solid recommendation back.
Okay.
I would just
Thank you,
ask
Corey.
that regardless of the direction we go, that we're sure to include our OALC students as well.
Okay. Thank you, Director Douglas. Superintendent McIntyre, any?
Yeah, just
other
in the
comments?
short term, I think I would like some direction, on some of those things that are a little bit more of a board nature. So as we're planning, and actually I maybe got a little bit more, I guess it's really for it's for you to decide, not for me so much as when you might, if you want things to come to you at the meeting, either next week or in July, and what those are, as far as the resolution, the moment of silence, and the board statement. So I'm just looking for a little more clarity on there. I think all the others, I have a pretty good idea of how to move that forward. So I'll stop talking.
I think all three of those from Director Dawson Walton and clarification from Director Mosqueda Jones was an interest in the July meeting, in an in-person meeting. So I believe that's the direction at this point. I don't see anybody shaking their head no. I see everyone shaking yes. So
thank you. That helps. I missed it completely. So sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll just add one last thing. Our goals are bringing a more refined version back. I look forward to your input and ideas. As much as I'd love to say I'll have it ready for you next week, it won't happen that way. There's too much big work, and we really are focused on what to do with the fall, and get that plan hammered out too. So by August 11th, it will come with a better 3-year operational plan, the board calendar, and we still got to finalize those strategic directions, and really in the end get that strategic plan around core values and our all those things that really normally would have been done first, but with our experience flipped on its upside down this spring, we had to launch into transition planning, operational planning, because so many things changed so quickly. So I'm grateful for your patience and understanding as we had to change course, still moving the work forward, but just in a different way. And you've all shared what I know my team, our cabinet feels. We feel the urgency you feel, and yet we want to do the work really well. So that's our leadership challenge right now. And thanks in advance for all your feedback and input over the next couple of weeks as we continue to just make this a better plan moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. With that is the end of the agenda items. I don't see anybody with the microphone on. So with that, I will take that as we are ready to adjourn. So thank you, everybody. And this meeting is adjourned at 9:33 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.